The ITEM Cross-Border Impact Assessment. Why, what, and how are we doing it? Why? Legislation and policy made by regional and national governments and the European Union can affect cross-border mobility and border regions. For policymakers and citizens in border regions, it is often not so easy to assess such potential negative or positive effects. Therefore, ITEM developed its cross-border impact assessment. This methodology identifies and assesses cross-border effects of legislation and policy in different kinds and aspects. We do this preferably before this comes into force. It helps policymakers when making decisions on new policies and the effects on cross-border regions. How does our methodology work? First, we define the cross-border territory for the assessment. Depending on the research issue, this can be a Euro region, but it also can be demarcated as a much larger or smaller territory. Think of border regions all over Europe. Secondly, we establish principles, benchmarks, and indicators. Principles refer to desired circumstances, for example to the situation that has been established in European legislation in which there is free mobility and non-discrimination of cross-border activities. Benchmarks are the standards that can be compared. An example is the previous situation or another region. Finally, the indicators allow us to interpret the consequences of legislation. Principles, benchmarks, and indicators derive from a number of values that are important in the EU context and are considered on those values. European integration. That is, the impacts on the freedom of citizens and companies with respect to the open border. Sustainable and socio-economic development of border regions. That is, how the regional development is affected by measures on open borders. And euregional cohesion. That is, how the level and quality of cooperation and relation across the border is influenced. Let's focus on some of our results. Since its beginning, ITEM assessed the impacts on dozens of cases. For example, we assessed the impact of the proposal for a German federal law on an autobahn mount. What would be the impact on the Euro region Mersey-Rhine? Next to the negative environmental consequences and cohesion for the villages around the border that were predicted, we concluded that Dutch and Belgian citizens were discriminated compared to German citizens. This was also the argument of the European Court of Justice to cancel the legislative project. Another example can be found in the Dutch Act to increase the lowest VAT rate. In this case, we predicted that the cross-border effects would be very limited, thus not worsening the economic competitiveness of entrepreneurs in the Dutch border region. Indeed, years later the effects appeared to be negligible. A final example, based on the expectation that more people will work from home after the corona crisis, governments prepared new legislation to promote working at home. While the idea is that workers have a certain right to work from home, frontier workers are disadvantaged in terms of taxes and social security. Our methodology revealed these negative effects. The cases are diverse, from changes in tax treaties to passenger name records, from raising the retirement age to strategies on spatial planning, and from the introduction of tolling to COVID-19. Whether it deals with, amongst others, healthcare, security, environment, taxation or climate, ITEM assesses the cross-border impacts for you. Do you want to know more? Feel free to contact us.